Good. Well, it's 11:30 Central European time. So it's 2020. If you want to view who's in the session, you can go to People, and if you need to see it better, then you can hide the chat or double click on the presentation or speaker. You can read more easily. And then after the events, just to remind you, you can use the networking function on the left-hand side of the screen, and also visit the exhibition area. So do try and make the most of that. And then, of course, you'll be well drilled by now. The conversation on social media, to join that, please use the hashtag
Can't hear you.
POLIS20.
I could hear you, okay, so you weren't on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, Evo can hear me. I can hear you, Peter. Let's keep our fingers crossed on that one. Okay. Hoping that that's Evo's confirmed you can hear me. Okay. Right, let's proceed. And our session speakers today, we've got a lovely panel for you. Seem to be coming from Northern Europe. We have representatives from Sweden, from the Netherlands and the UK. We have Per Elvingson and Lovisa Blomér from Örebro Municipality, and Klara Jonsson from the city of Gothenburg. She'll be presenting with Sara Brorström from Gothenburg University. And then we have Jasper Meekes from city of Nijmegen. And then we have presenting together Hoekstra from Rijkswaterstaat and Kevin van der Linden from the city of Rotterdam. And then finally, at the end, Peter Jones from College London. So we have 5 presentations, but we have 8 speakers. So you get better value for money in this session. My name's Paul Curtis. I work for VECTOS. We're a transport planning consultancy based in the UK and Germany. And we participate in all sorts of urban and rural mobility projects through Horizon 2020 and others. I'm really happy to be moderating the session today. And so we can go straight over to our first presentation from Per and Lovisa. And I can ask them to share their screen. I'll just come out myself. And yeah, just a reminder, please do put your questions in the chat box. What we'll do, we'll take each presentation one by one, and then we should have some time at the end to answer those questions all together. So put your questions in, and then I can keep track. Okay, off over to you.
Thank you,
Lovisa and Per.
We're very happy that to be here, and thanks for letting us start this session. We will talk about the road to a BRT, bus rapid transit investment decision. In February-March 2020, the city of Örebro and the regional authority decided to jointly invest in a new bus rapid transit system for the city to be built at least the first part 2021 until 2025. Backcasting and traffic modeling have been important tools to reach a political understanding and agreement leading to the final decision. We will tell you more about this in the coming 10 minutes. So first, a few words about our city, Örebro, 6th biggest city in Sweden with 150,000 inhabitants. It's a regional center situated 200 kilometers west of Stockholm, a university city, many employees in trade and service sectors, And due to our geographical, now the presentation is changing by itself, so that's why I'm changing back all the time. Due to our geographical position, we're also a strong logistical center, both for road and rail. Now to the next slide. For the modal split, you could say we're a cycling city. Örebro Municipality has had some targets for a more sustainable modal split for several years, and many measures have been implemented, but so far the change in travel habits have been limited. One of the reasons is, of course, that the change in the traffic system is complex and it reacts slowly on changes. But mostly important that the measures taken so far has been in a limited scale, not really affecting the balance between the different transport modes. We're also a growing city. Prognosis estimated we will grow up with about 50,000 inhabitants until year 2040. This means that with the same travel habits as today, the number of trips will be plus 35%. And even if we reach a modal split target in our sump, the number of car trips will still be the same as today. So, for us to remain an accessible and attractive city, we need to prioritize the space-efficient and sustainable transport modes. To help us with this and to visualize this in a way, we put up a VECTOS traffic model with 2 future scenarios for 2040. The one to the left, there is no change in modal split, and the other one to the right, the modal split we have reached our modal split target for that. This has also, and this images has also been an important part of our communication to our politicians. We have been able to say, do we want a city like this to the left, or like this to the right, where the one to the right, there's still a lot of people that could transport themselves, but with more sustainable transport modes. We not only used the model and the print screens from the model, but we also used pictures, where this first picture should illustrate the scenario with no change. Crowded streets, the bus is still stopping on the side, having difficulty getting access and going back to the road. This second picture on the bottom should illustrate a scenario where still a lot of people could transport themselves, but we have a bus rapid transit system. This is the same street as the previous pictures, with this before after picture, or coming before after. And we find this very efficient in order to communicate both with the citizens and our politicians. I will also mention a bit briefly about the bus rapid transit project, so you at least know some things about it before you leave this presentation. Then after this slide, I will hand over to my colleague Per. So the first part will be built in 21 to 2025. It will go from the southeastern part of the city, passing the university, the residential areas, sport arenas on the way to the city center, bus and railway station. It will also go by. Then the second part will split into 2. One goes towards more residential areas, and one more going to the north will go more to commercial areas and also big residential areas. It's a total distance of 7 kilometers, about half the distance, the busiest part of it. The buses will have their own lanes and receive priority in the traffic signals. Our estimated cost for the first part is 18 to 25 million euros, and the half of it we will search governmental funding for. So now over to Per.
Yes, thank you, Lovisa. As Lovisa just mentioned, this BRT investment has not been decided, but then the question is if it is enough to meet our targets. Not according to another kind of modeling where we have looked at generalized costs, which is a method to translate as many factors as possible that affects the travel decision into money. And then you can see from the left bar is the situation today, the model split, and the second bar in the middle shows the estimated model split with BRT and improved public transport in the city. There we can see that public transport will increase and car trips decrease because of travel time effect. And then the bar to the right is the same as in the middle, but we also have lower fares in public transport and a doubling of the charge for car parking in the city center. Here we can see that cycling is also increasing a bit and also public transport on the expense of car trips. But that you can see from the red dotted line, it's still not enough to meet our model split targets. So then the next slide, what has been decided already beside the BRT investment is a new bus network in the city is under consideration, and our politicians has decided to substantially increase the cost for car parking in the city, and I think that's an effect of the BRT project. The side effect, or the BRT project was an important driver also to start work with the parking cost. Unfortunately, our region struggles a lot with its economy, so they will not lower the ticket prices in public transport. So we need to do still more, affecting the generalized cost if we want many people to use the BRT system and also to reach our model split targets. And it can be either measures affecting travel times or the direct costs for transport. And some examples are given in the box. So to sum up, I think the main conclusion from our modeling is that extensive measures must be implemented if we want extensive changes in travel habits, and that models together with other visualization, as Lovisa shown, are effective to illustrate for decision makers both consequences and what is needed to reach targets. And thanks to modeling, we have, for the first time, I think, been able to illustrate the magnitude of action needed to achieve the targets, and thereby encouraged our politicians to take new and bold decisions despite opposition from some stakeholders. And if you want to know more, please contact us and also read our article in Thinking Cities. Thank you.
Thanks both of you. Thanks for that, really interesting. And I think we're going to see a little more about space efficient modes as you were describing there. That's a theme we'll see in some of the other presentations coming up. Thanks, and we'll come back to you at the end, hopefully with some questions. Our next present, and thank you for keeping to time, by the way. You get 2 house points for that. Our next presentation, we go to Gothenburg, and we have Klara Jonsson and Sara Brorström, consultancy urbanista, and she's working with the city of Gothenburg at the moment. She specializes in planning, mobility, and urban management. She's worked in many large infrastructure projects, including the London Olympic Games, which sounds really exciting. And Sara is Associate Professor in Organization and Management at Gothenburg University. Her field is in city development, sustainability, and collaborative governance. And they're going to present to us a presentation on unlocking the streetscape potential of the Hisingen Bridge in Gothenburg. Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I'm very impressed with your pronunciations as well. It's not easy with all these weird letters we have in Sweden. So our presentation is about how urban design and streetscaping happens not only through a matter of planning and design, but also over many years through a process of collaboration, negotiation, and compromise between different parties. And thank you for your introduction. I think you already said it all. Do you want to add something? Who you are, Sarah?
No, I think you said it perfectly. It's not an easy name.
Thank you. So just briefly, this is where we are with our project in the southwestern part of Sweden on the west coast, in the city of Gothenburg, which is a city of about 600,000 inhabitants, expected to grow to about 730 inhabitants by 2040. And that means that there's a lot happening now here in the city in terms of urban development. We see both infrastructure projects and urban development projects going on both north and south of the river. And one of those infrastructure projects is this new bridge that I'm involved in building. The Hisingen bridge is the one nearer to us in the picture here with the 4 pylons, and it replaces the old Göta älv bridge, which is next to it here in the picture. It's a vertical lift bridge which will open next year and cater for all transport modes, so trams, buses, walking and cycling, and cars. And a key thing with this bridge is that it's lower than the previous one. And that is, of course, a result of compromise between many interests here, not least with the interests of the river and the goods freight on the river. But that means that the city is much better able to connect the 2 sides, the north and south side of the city, and address issues of social sustainability and segregation that we have. It also helps us a lot in reaching our modal targets for walking and cycling. But what we will speak about today is that this design frees up a lot of land space because it just uses less land when it's a lower bridge, and it's also designed in a different way. In particular, we'll focus today on the southern side of the river, where there's a lot going on. We have a dense new inner city under development in the regional center of Gothenburg, and this is the area around the central station, with a bridge here in the orange-red color. And most of what we see here actually doesn't exist today. So here we see a new underground railway, a decked over almost highway, I would like to call it, and lots of other urban dense development happening here. And as you can see here, the bridge cuts through all of this dense new urban development and really becomes an integrated city street. And that has been a key feature of this idea with a new bridge from the beginning. But there are many challenges in realizing that over time, because it means that we need to work from planning through to delivery in order to really make it happen in this way. And Sarah will give a little bit about the perspective on this, and then I'll talk about how we've addressed those things that Sarah is raising from an academic viewpoint, how we've addressed those in the project.
Yes, I will try to do that. So from a research point of view, this is of course very interesting, all this complexity. How do we deal with that from within an organization? In organization research, this has become a matter of organizing. It's been described as a matter of organizing, where can we incorporate grand challenges and wicked issues. That often means that it requires more collaboration between actors. So we involve more actors and more perspectives into the organizations that to deal with these kind of projects. And that also means that it's increasingly difficult to manage these kind of projects. For instance, this is this paradox between inclusiveness and efficiency. So we know that when we include more perspective, decision-making goes slower, becomes slower and more difficult. And this is also something we often describe in terms of the public sector transition, where we have seen changes from the old public administration into new public management and now recently into new public governance, which talks more about how we can collaborate between different perspectives and actors. And this and this also means that we don't really remove one thing before we add another one. So for people working in this project, it's become a hybridity, where they have to combine different logics. So from an individual perspective, these organizations consist of people that in everyday life have to deal with these different logics and combine them and balance them in different ways. So in public management research, we talk about hybrid professionals, which are professionals that are in everyday life to combine different logics. And the classical example is to combine business logics with public value. So for instance, sustainability, and also be on time and within budget. And what we have seen is that it's an important of key individuals. So have individuals that take on very important roles to translate between different levels and also to facilitate collaboration. The problem with these roles sometimes are that they have a big responsibility for large issues, but they don't always have mandates or the budget to make decisions that are needed. And these are things that we made experience in the Hisingen Bridge project.
Thank you, Klara. That sounds really difficult. I don't know how we do that.
Yeah, me too.
But I'm going to come on to how we address some of those challenges that Sara described there. But just to give you an idea of what it might look like then in the future, these are the types of technical challenges that we're trying to solve and that Sara calls grand challenges. It's, for example, here on the left, we see the ramps for the tram of the new bridge. There is this idea in the city that maybe in the future that will cut through an urban development which is quite dense and be integrated, encapsulated, so to say, by that development. And on the right-hand side, we see the public space of the bridge merging with the private space of coming development. So we get this integrated city street. And in that picture, the bridge is still at height. So there's also then an area underneath the bridge that we need to manage. What do we do with that? But at the moment, none of these things exist. So we build this bridge before, and then these things are developed afterwards. To go back to some of the things that Sara said, I think maybe we've done some of this without really knowing it. We have taken on these challenges through organization in the way that Sara described. So not only do we have this translator function where we have specific people working with these issues of urban development in the infrastructure project, so that they can translate between planning and delivery, or between planners and engineers who often speak a different language. That's one thing we've done. But also we have an organizational flexibility over time, where in the earlier stages of the project, we focused more on the planning issues. And then there was also more scope to change things in the project. Like Sara said, there is of course, conflict between the scope, meeting time, meeting deadlines, meeting costs, and delivering other benefits as well. So we've adapted our organization over time to try and tackle those challenges. Then we have this issue of many actors and perspectives. Yes, there's a lot of that, and they also shift over time. And we have seen this paradox of inclusiveness and efficiency. It's not always that we actually manage to close out issues because we have to proceed with the infrastructure project. We have a strict deadline. So sometimes planning processes are just too slow for a project which is already in the construction phase in a contract. And there needs to be negotiation around that. And of course, project culture is key here. Developing a culture where we can collaborate, negotiate, discuss, have an openness around these issues, so that we can also identify game changers early. So key issues that could create problems later. So we've done work around that as well. And we've done generally quite a lot of work on these soft factors, like how we work together, how we are with each other, who we let into the process, and so on. And then your last point there about hybrid professionals, I think definitely there's an element of that. And we have people who are key individuals who sort of keep the vision alive from beginning to end. And if they leave, those are big shoes to follow. And the issue of mandates, we've seen that it's extremely important what we said from the beginning in the vision, and how that we have something to lean back on to say, hey, this is actually what we agreed on early. Now let's try to deliver it in practice. That gives some mandate, even though there may not always be a formal mandate in the process. And then, of course, it's a classical one. Who pays for urban development? Who pays for stuff that's not in our scope? Who pays for changes that we do? There's a lot of negotiation and compromise around these issues. But just being aware that that's going to come has helped us a lot, because we have been organized in a way to deal with it. But of course, it's ongoing work, and we do our best to create something that will look something like this when we're done, an integrated city street. That's what we're working towards. That's us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Klara. Thanks, Sara. Very inspiring hearing about the organizational perspective. Thank you for that. And also the project culture, sort of takeaways for me. We'll hope to come back with some questions later. But again, thank you for keeping to time. I will send a check in the post for 10 cents to thank you for that. And we're going to now move away from Sweden and on to the Netherlands, and Jasper Meekes from the city of Nijmegen. And Jasper, whilst you find your presentation, I can tell everyone that he works as a senior policy advisor on mobility and spatial development, such as the train station we're going to see right now. And he's also the project leader for the city's Interreg project called eHubs, which I'm familiar with myself, which is encouraging hub-based shared electric mobility. But I'll pass over to you now, Jasper.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yeah, some of you may have already seen part of what I'm going to share today in the Meet the Dutch session that took place on Monday, where I was also invited to talk about train station for one. But here in this on this stage, I hope to elaborate a bit more and tell you a bit more about what we're doing with the train station in Nijmegen. Well, unfortunately, I would have all liked to be able to show you actually in place here in Nijmegen what we're doing, but well, with this going digitally, I'll have to deal with this presentation. So the Nijmegen Central train station, it's a train station that has gone through a number of developments throughout the years. You see here a few pictures of what the train station used to look like. On the top left, you see the train station as it was originally built, which unfortunately was destroyed during the Second World War during a bombing. Then the train station at the top right was what was built after that, and that has been adapted in a number of efforts trying to change the area, catering to new needs. But what we've seen is that in recent years, all solutions that have been implemented towards problems that were perceived, they always created new issues that came up. And so what we're really missing is a more integral approach to the entire train station area, which solves all of the issues that we're dealing with in this train station simultaneously. So what I'll be talking to you about is our plans in this sense, and I will be focusing on the mobility aspects of it. Of course, there's a lot more to tell, but if you have questions about that, then please get in touch with me later. So first of all, let's talk about why now. So we are now working on this project for the Nijmegen train station, and there's a couple of reasons for this, because, well, first of all, of course, the problems are urgent, but other than that, we have some momentum now, which comes first of all from a national program for high frequency rail transport, which includes also a new entrance to the train station on the west side of the track. So Nijmegen is one of the few larger train stations in the Netherlands that has only one main entrance on one side of the railway, which means that from the west side of the city, you have to actually first go underneath the train tracks, and then you can enter the train station from the east side, instead of actually being able to access the train station from the west. So this is a large project that really gives us momentum to actually look at the entire train station. Secondly, the city has a large housing shortage at the moment, and there's a national program to actually stimulate building new houses to solve this housing shortage. And so recently we signed a deal with the national government to actually invest in more affordable housing, and there's national funding for this. But this also creates extra incentive to develop the train station, as we say, well, if we want to build affordable housing, the main locations where we can do that, also to do this without creating a lot of congestion, is to actually build them near our major transport hubs, and the central train station is of course the main hub in that sense. But to do that, we need a train station that can actually cope with these increasing numbers of passengers, that also provides the welcoming gateway to the city, that these people who should be living near this train station, that they actually have the incentive to want to live in this area. So it needs to be an attractive train station, it needs to be a functional train station. And well, with these different efforts from the national government for one, but also other developments in both the city and the province, it actually gives us now the momentum to go for an integral approach where we can really change the entire train station area and solve many different issues that we deal with at once. As I said, I'll be focusing today on the mobility hubs, the mobility issues. But first, let me tell you a bit about the Nijmegen train station. So, it's a transport hub for various modalities. It has over 45,000 train passengers on a daily basis. That's not including those actually changing from one train to the other. So that's the people who are actually getting on or off the train in Nijmegen to go to a destination within Nijmegen, or to change to a different mode of transport. Then there's a large bus station, which you can also see at the top part, which has over 30,000 bus passengers daily. And of course, this being in the Netherlands, the train station is also highly visited by cyclists. But one of the issues we deal with here in Nijmegen is that it's not only that there's a lot of cyclists that go to the train station, but there's also a large and a major cycling route. The university campus, which is one of the main employment areas in the city region here in our region, with the north of the city on the other side of the river, the Waal River, and that cycling route really is an important connection for the city as well. And that means that in front of the train station, there's over 18,000 cyclists that pass each day. Additionally, of course, there are two main walking routes from the train station to the city center, and these are perpendicular to the cycling route and to the major bus route, which means that there's a lot of that conflicts arise between these different modalities. And well, the real challenge we're facing within this area is that, of course, this being a major hub, we really want to connect all these different transport modalities, but in the same time we're seeing that this creates conflicts, and we want to untangle these conflicts to make sure that people feel safe and that transport can actually be used efficiently and safely, and that it's a comfortable environment. So if I dive into these conflicts a bit more, what we see here is a figure that shows you a bit the way this train station works. So if you look at the train station, from the train station there's two major walking routes which are in green towards the city center. The buses mainly to the university campus, but also to a lot of other destinations in the city, they cross straight in front of the train station, and so they clash with these pedestrians. Also, as I mentioned, this cycling route crosses straight in front of the train station, and that means that there's a lot of conflicts with between the pedestrians and the cyclists. And what you see is that this, especially the fact that you as a pedestrian coming out of the train station, you first encounter the bus conflict, and then immediately after you encounter the bicycle conflict, and especially this sequence of multiple conflicts is deemed very can be very harrowing to pedestrians entering the city, and so it's something that really affects their experience of the walking routes to the city. And additionally, the conflicts between the buses that go towards the city center and the cyclists that pass in front of the train station is also something that can be deemed unsafe, especially since sometimes the angles at which these crossings happen can be can make it difficult for bus drivers to actually see all the cyclists. Cyclists, of course, sometimes come out of nowhere, and so in that sense, in terms of traffic safety, it's definitely not ideal. So that's why we're working on other solutions. Now then, what are the solutions that we're looking at? Well, we want to untangle these modalities, but while still retaining connections. Now, one of the first things we've always looked at was, well, can't we maybe lower the bus, or at least make sure that these buses don't cross the station area as much? But because, as you may be able to see, there's a tunnel that goes underneath the bus station, so that means that we can't actually lower the bus station, and lowering the bus lane to have a non-level crossing with both the pedestrians there isn't possible, because the buses won't be on the level of the bus station in time to make that possible. So unfortunately, the conflict between the pedestrians and the buses is something that we can't actually take out. What we can take out, and which is what we're actually looking at doing, is the conflict between the bus and between the cyclists and the pedestrians. So what we're actually using is the physical features of the area, where we see that the train station itself is higher than some of the locations surrounding it. So here, from this tunnel road that you can see passing underneath the train station, there's a lower place, and you can actually cycle up now towards the train station. And on the north side also, the road dives into a lower area. And so what we're doing is we're saying let's keep these cyclists on this lower level, then they can, through this lower level, enter the train station area, where we also have multiple underground bicycle parking facilities, so that people who actually have to be in this train station area, they can park their bikes there. Now, for the cyclists that just pass through the train station, they can take a quick route without having to cross the pedestrian areas, without having to cross the bus routes. So then, what does that all look like? Let's see. Yeah. So this is then what we get. What we're creating is a large bicycle valley. So you can see here in the picture that there's a large 6-meter wide bicycle path that goes straight through the train station area. We have the pedestrian crossings that go over the cycling route. You can see the entrance to the bike facility underneath the train station that is used by the cyclists. And because we get a lot more space, we have more opportunities, and we still need to design on that further, to actually integrate this crossing between the pedestrians and the buses in a far more integral way, and in a far safer way. So that's something that actually we provide the space for. And additionally, because we're taking away a lot of bicycle parking that is now above ground in this area, we're actually, for a number of buses, mainly the buses to the campus, we make them stop here and turn around, and so they don't actually have to cross in front of the train station anymore. So this is a solution we're going for. And fortunately, last week, the Dutch national government, the Ministry for Infrastructure and Water, announced that they are very enthusiastic about this project, and that they also want to contribute financially. So this is something that we'll be working on for the coming years. So thank you very much for your attention. If you want to get in touch, here's my email address, and you can always send me a message.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jasper. That was really inspiring. I love that image you showed at the end. Took a screen grab so I could tell you if that's okay. Really making most efficient use of limited space. Good luck with that project. Thank you. We're going to move on. Again, thank you for sticking to time. This is going very smoothly so far. Next up, we have another double act from the Netherlands. We have Alan Hoekstra from Rijkswaterstaat. Sorry about that. And Kevin van Linden from the city of Rotterdam. And so Alan is an advisor in sustainable mobility for the Dutch Ministry of Transport. That's easier to say. He's currently focusing on hubs and cycling policy. And I actually looked on his LinkedIn page this morning. He's also a composer and has produced songs about urban planning. So
that's true.
Later, please put them in the chat box. And Kevin, he works as an advisor in mobility and area development at the city of Rotterdam, and he's experienced in urban planning and accessibility. So I've given you a bit of time then to find your slides. Wonderful.
There they are. Thank you, Paul. I will start the presentation, and then halfway Kevin will take over. Our presentation is called Sustainable Urban Accessibility in Travel Chains. Next slide, please. Yes, well, we're seeing that the mobility system is changing from a system that was mainly focused on separate modalities to an integral system. And we see in the cities that there is more and more space for bicycles and walking as the cities are densifying, and meaning less rooms for cars in the cities. And that's leading to more travel change, in which cars from outside the city are parked somewhere, and people go with another modality, the bike or public transport, further into the city. Well, of course, these travel chains, they need places to change from one modality to another, and that's why we need hubs in that. Then Rijkswaterstaat, where I work with, indeed, it's a part of the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, and we build and we maintain the Dutch highway system. And well, like we just said, it's more and more integral. So we thought, well, the highway system is also playing a role in urban mobility systems, and how can we explore that further? Well, we did a study to explore that, in which we looked at the ways that the highway system can contribute to the local urban systems. What we did is we looked at all possible travel chains that are there that you can imagine. If you have a journey that's on a regional level, and you can see, well, there's a lot of possibilities to go from in modalities, and you can also see that there's some kind of main journey, and there's left and right, you see city cores, that there's always some kind of change from one modality to another. We pointed on this the places that the transfers are, and that's the next slide. And like we see, there are different types of places that you could go from one modality to another, and you can also see there are sometimes in the cities, sometimes just around the cities, and sometimes more further away from the cities. The next slide shows what kind of hubs these are. And I will now go from the more further away from the city hubs to the city hubs that are actually in the cities, and then Kevin will give some examples of the last type, the hubs in the cities. But I will go now from the congestion hub. That's what we call a hub that's further away from the city. It's actually on the highway, so you can change on the highway to, for example, a bus transit rapid I say that the other way around, I guess, bus, rapid transit, or a train to the city. Actually, you just, you have 4B, it's a different kind of type, it's okay. Where you go from a train station to the city. Then you have what we call the type 3, that's the agglomeration hub. So it's closer to the city, it's about 10 kilometers. And that's a place where you can change when you arrive by car to the city public transport system, or to an e-bike, which is also a great opportunity to get into the city and this distance. Then we have the ring road hub. As Rijkswaterstaat, we like to keep the traffic as much as possible away from the ring roads, because they are very crowded already in most of the cities in the Netherlands. So the hub that we saw before, that's the most perfect hub for visitors of the city. But there are also occasions that that's a good where there's a good spot to place the hubs directly on the ring road, and it's also very suitable for parking places for the inhabitants of the city, because we see that it's more and more common to not park your car just before your house, but on hubs that's a little further away. Then we come to the city hubs. That's the little hubs of little, but they're the smallest ones in this series that are in the cities, in the neighborhoods, where you can park your car, where you can take a shared car or take a shared bike, where perhaps the bus is also coming. We have a little variation on that as well. That's the next one, where there's also a train station involved. We're now exploring these further, and there are a lot of cases already. We can see that the provinces and municipalities are very active in already building all of these types of hubs. And we're now, as Rijkswaterstaat, deepening some of the cases. We are exploring the hubs on rest areas. We're exploring some hubs like in Breukelen, that's close to the city of Utrecht. Now Kevin will give some examples of the type 1 hubs, the neighborhood hubs in Rotterdam.
Thank you, Alan. Maybe if you can put your mic on. Yeah, thank you very much. I hear myself on the background. Just to give you a bit of a sneak peek in Rotterdam and what we have been, I would like to briefly tell you something on the one hand, the development, and on the other, the challenge in the Hoogkwartier. We have a project. It's an area which is kilometers to the west of the city center. The city center you can see in the back of this image, positions along the river Meekes. In this area, we are planning to develop 5,000 to 7,000 jobs and houses, combined with some manufacturing industry, which actually has a link to the historical use of this area. Within this area, of which the spatial framework is now in place, we are planning this development in 10 to 20 years time frame. And because of the big amount of jobs and houses we foresee in the area, there's actually a model shift required to less car use. And this we foresee to do by focusing more on public transport use, but also on shared mobility and mobility as a service province. Besides that, collective parking in hubs is one of the and there I would like to zoom in a bit more on. I'll show you this image. Actually, this gives a a bit of a grasp on the big amount of research that has been done on hub development in this area. We have counted the amount of parking spaces we foresee, but also the connections that could possibly be made in the area, resulting in the big purple circle in the right corner, where at the moment already a metro station exists, and which could actually be a bigger entrance to the area, and a network of hubs within the area by some indicative areas with the pink circles. And those pink circles actually in different categories, of course, but mainly into main fonts. A residential hub, where, for example, on the ground floor, packages, services, or a neighborhood shop, and maybe a playground on the roof, or more working area related hub on which on the ground floor loading and unloading can take place, and maybe even on the roof. So, oh, something went wrong there. Yes, I think this next slide is on. Well, to get there, we actually, as I said, did quite a lot of research, and some elements always will be part of this this strategy for the future, like a shared bike system, but all what is a big component, and the stimulation of cycling. To actually get a network of hubs, we stepwise. First, the development of the public space in the area, followed by shared mobility services to be and the utilization of the current parking. After that, we could actually follow up with and the first hubs, so that along the way a flexible system of hubs could be developed, which are corresponding with the needs at a certain moment in time. To get a grasp on how such a mobility hub could be formed, we also did a challenge, or an experiment, so to say, in the hoofdkwartier at the end of 2019. Located in the city center of Rotterdam, as the green area in this image shows us. And the challenge existed of two elements. First of all, the availability of shared mobility services, and on the other way, the one-way street, which was defined in this area. I will zoom in on the left image a bit more on the shared mobility services. Well, as I said, at the end of 2019, this challenge took place, and 47 neighborhood participants participated in this. What they did is that they, in case they were owning a car, they parked it outside the area in a parking garage somewhere else. And for 2 months' time, they made use of all shared mobility services, like electric cars, but also electric cargo bikes, electric vehicles, but also normal bikes, which were located in a hub in the center of this neighborhood. They were provided also with a public transport pass to make use of the public transport from their area. Besides, the participants were compensated for the cost of ownership of their car for the time during this experiment. The goal of this experiment was to research the link between mobility and public space, and to extent to which this would change mobility behavior. To actually make this link also visible in the area, the parking lots that were not used during the challenge were made green public spaces, as we see in the image on the right-hand side. And then the results of this challenge. Well, actually, it can be summarized as the challenges that are listed on this slide. The neighborhood really could increase their awareness of the green public areas and the impact that mobility normally has on them. So that was a positive thing. They even asked the councillor to actually arrange these areas to be like this in the future as well. Also, it increased the thinking about mobility in relation to the livability aspects. People talked about it more than before. The use rate was rather limited, to be honest, like 20 to 35%. And actually the people only, especially used the services if they wanted to go to not easily accessible areas that couldn't be so easily reached by public transport. And of course, some conclusions of this experiment. It made people more open to the change in travel behavior, but we also noticed that storytelling is a really important aspect to actually get people thinking of this combination of mobility on the one side and green public areas on the other. Also, oriented approach is really important, also related to the skill level of this experiment, and that the visible changes improve the involvement of the people. Connecting to what the previous speakers, Lovisa and Per, also in Örebro, saw, the behavioral change is really difficult to actually reach. And our conclusion is that an experiment should actually take at least a year to actually get this running. The need for shared mobility depends really on the accessibility of the area as well. And there too, also the last point, the structure is really context dependent. With, I would like to conclude these two examples of the city of Rotterdam.
Brilliant, thanks guys. Very interesting indeed. Good to see the results of that last pilot in particular. Pretty hard to seem to be getting traction in lots of places at the moment, and good to see those results and people valuing the public space. I can see some questions coming in, and I'll fire them to you after our last presentation. So thank you. I'll come back to you in a moment. And so let's go over to our last presenter from University College London, UCL. It's Professor Peter Jones, and he's Professor of Transport and Sustainable Development in the Centre for Transport Studies at UCL, and he's the scientific coordinator of the MORE project. That's a Horizon 2020 project, and you've probably seen him before at one of these POLIS conferences. He's got an extremely wide range of academic and policy experience. So Peter, I will hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and hello everybody. So what I'll do is give a very brief overview of the MORE project, particularly around aspects to do with dynamic space management. So the challenge we're facing on our busier urban streets in cities are increasing due to a number of factors. We have the emergence of new modal options, for example, e-scooters. Many sectors are making greater use of things like home deliveries, whether it's retail, hospitals, and so on. There's a greater interest in streets as places and supporting place-related activities, and there's densification of population employment. But at the same time, the curb and carriageway space we have is largely fixed, so the pressures and conflicts on the road network are intensifying. And so in MORE, we're trying to address this conundrum in two ways. Firstly, by using street space more imaginatively, flexibly, and dynamically. And secondly, by looking at the possibility of using LED road signs and road markings in order to indicate dynamic change. MORE stands for Multimodal Optimization for Road Space in Europe. And what we're doing is looking at existing and future pressures on the main roads in cities that connect the urban nodes, including their major attractors like city centres, ports, and so on, with the national and European, trans-European road network. And as part of that, we're trying to develop a series of tools and processes that will enable these key routes to be planned, designed, managed, and operated in a way that make them more responsive to existing and future pressures and in a more flexible way. And to do that, we're developing 4 sets of tools. Tools to help generate innovative design options, tools to help stakeholders actively engage in the street redesign process, detailed micro simulation of behavior in different types of street layouts, and also a comprehensive approach to evaluation to look at these different design options from various perspectives. We have 5 cities which are our laboratories, spread, as you can see, across Europe on 6 of the different trans-European corridors. In addition to that, we have a number of universities, a number of consultants, including POLIS, VECTOS, and also a number of organisations that represent user groups, including POLIS and the cities. And in each of these cities, the authorities have chosen what we're calling a feeder route, which is a route in from the trans-European network. In the case of London, it's the M25 orbital motorway around London through into the city centre. So each city has identified, as I say, a feeder route, and within that feeder route, they've identified 2 different types of circumstances. One we're defining as roads, and the other we're defining as streets. So roads effectively are parts of the network that are designed just for moving motorised traffic, as you can see here in the top picture. Whereas streets are much more complex because we not only have motorised traffic, but non-motorised traffic. We have buildings on either sides that need loading, servicing, things like that. We have pedestrians on the footway, and we have pedestrians crossing the road. So the really challenging areas are on our streets. And so each city has chosen what we call a stress section. And on the right-hand side of this picture, you can see part of the stress section on the A2 corridor in London. And this is one of the exercises we've carried out, inviting citizens and other businesses, other people passing through, to give comments on what the problems are at the moment on that particular stress section, and whether there are particular times of day or how they impact various people. As well as asking people their opinions, we're also collecting data where that's available. So here's an example of the stress section in Lisbon, where the authorities collated data on the location of accidents along that stress section. But we're looking a bit more broadly than just at the street itself, and we're thinking of the idea of the street as an ecosystem. So we're looking not just at the carriageway and the footway, the buildings either side that actually generate the demand for a lot of the activities on and around the street, parking, loading, bus patronage and so on, but also under the street, what scope there is for metro systems or underground logistics tubes to take pressure off the street network, and also above the street, what future might there be for using drones to take some pressure off the surface network. And in doing that, we're looking quite systematically at who are the different potential or existing road users, ranging from pedestrians, cyclists through to emergency services and so on, and what priority on this particular section at that time of day under those circumstances do we want to give to those groups, and also what sort of general objectives are we trying to achieve in the redesign of the street space around movement, around placemaking, around the operation of the road network, and also wider economic, social and environmental objectives. And these are screenshots from our option generation tool. The real challenge is how to think more innovatively about how we might make better use of that limited road space. And actually, in that sense, COVID has been really helpful because cities have implemented a number of measures, initially temporarily, perhaps more radical than they might have been thinking of otherwise. And on the left, we can see Boston, for example, where what was a road open for general traffic has now been redivided. So there's a segregated cycle lane, there's a segregated bus lane, and there's just one lane for general traffic. And on the right-hand side, we have an